Before we get started with the show, here's a quick word from our sponsor, Global Training Center. As trade compliance professionals, you want to make sure that your procedures and documentation are completed as correctly as possible to avoid any delays and possible fines. We provide a range of trade compliance courses that will fit your needs. From in-person or web training to recorded on-demand courses, we can train one or even thousands on your team through your learning platform or on our portal. We can even customize a private session for your team. Go to globaltrainingcenter.com to find out more.
Today, we have got a great show, and we're talking about something that's a little different. And Lila, you want to introduce our topic today, and we'll get into it. And we're going to start tapping. We've got a large panel here to talk through something that, in my opinion, is a pretty cool group of people that get to assemble and try and affect change in the industry.
Okay, so this episode came about because at the first beginning of the year, we had Vincent Annunziato come to our show and talk about different things that the CBP is doing. So he had mentioned during that episode that for the public or private sector to get involved and collaborate, or even just to get involved with CBP and work on projects, or just at least to be involved in the efforts. He mentioned a group called TSN. So that group, I reached out to them, and in fact, the one that I reached out to was Megan Montgomery, which you all may know from NCBFAA, and so she got this whole group together for us, and so that's where we are right now. This episode will be talking about what the TSN does, how it works. But not only that, but we also have Vinny on the show to give us an update of the efforts that he talked about, because apparently there has been a lot of progress since the last time we talked. And so we're going to catch up with him as well. But for right now, part of the TSN, representing the TSN, we have, of course, Megan, whom I mentioned earlier, Megan Montgomery. And by the way, all of these names and all of these contact information, everything will be on the show notes, so look it up, because it's going to be a little hard to keep up. And then we have Fred, and Fred, I'm sorry, later we can have Klemishevitz. Thank you. Thank you so much. And then Melissa Ehrman. It's like Smith, yes. And then we have Melissa Ehrman. She's, I don't know if she's representing NAFTZ, but she does work there at NAFTZ. And then we have Fanny Flores, which Fanny Flores is at Dakar, but again, all part of this group. And of course, we're going to have Vinny Annunziato as well from CBP. But so that's a whole group here. This is the largest group we've ever had on our podcast, which is kind of cool just to see how this works out. But anyway, so it's going to be fun editing anyway. So.
Well, folks, hey, listen, first off, welcome to our show. And when we're talking about, to our listeners, when we're talking about TSN, that's the Trade Support Network. And it works in kind of like you have the COAC, which is a separate type of scenario there with COAC's advisory group with customs. But then there's a lot of things that come out of COAC sometimes, and some are independent to TSN itself. But there are some things that need to be worked out as far as some of the procedures of a concept of an idea. What if we were to do X, Y, and Z, or some of those kinds of things? And so some of those ideas get pushed off into TSN and the different committees that literally hammer out some of the details of the process. Is that a pretty fair assessment of how TSN can support the overall concept here, folks? And Fred, I'm going to throw to you, since you're a phenomenal system guy. So, there's a lot of things that come back with system enhancements and data flows and all that. What about that?
Yeah, Andy, that's we do work hand in hand with customs on new initiatives. And a lot of other things that TSN does too. But from a technical side, we do go over what they're trying to do from a technical aspect to make sure it's going to work both with the trade and customs, because we all realize what customs has to get. But then again, from the trade side, the group represents a various folks from the trade side. I mean, we have importers, we have carriers, we have all kinds of people. We have technical folks, we have brokers. So it's a big brush that covers all the folks that are in the TSN. So we get a lot of different background and a lot of different insights to what's going on with customs. But we take the ideas and we make sure that whatever technical changes are going to come, that we get it works for both the trade and CBP, and we both walk away happy with something that's actually usable and works and it's user friendly. So that's kind of an overview of high level of what we do.
And let me add, Vinny, I'm going to throw something at you from your perspective, and I'll let you jump in here just real quick. But Vinny, from your perspective, from a CBP, are you looking at TSN as, well, there's a bunch of squeaky mice over there, or squeaky wheels, if you will, and then like, oh, let's throw them a bone or whatever? Or is this something that really is a good collaboration between CBP and the private sector?
Andy, the last time we had the podcast, I thought I said TSA, not TSN.
You are so bad. You're so bad.
I got you. Listen, TSN has always been an integral part of everything that we do. I rely on them, even back in the old days with the setting up of ACE, on their technical prowess. Because if we didn't understand the impact to the trade and get their input on some of the technical stuff, we would not put together what we were able to put together. So they're very much a part of what we're doing. In fact, this is a new process for me. I'm trying to figure out exactly when to bring TSN in on the project. We're at the ground floor of a lot going on. So we're trying to work in on the innovation side, how we can get TSN involved and make sure that we're doing things correctly from the trade's perspective.
I like to think of it as COAC focuses primarily on policy and TSN focuses primarily on implementation.
That is actually a great summary there. I think that's phenomenal, because there's, conceptually, you push forward a policy to say, well, we need to do something regarding whatever. But it's, as the old adage, the devil's in the details, is like, okay, how are we going to implement this policy? What's it literally translate from a regulation, from a policy perspective, into the actual details and the procedures and the systems and the data, actually who's going to transmit what and when and how and all that kind of stuff. And that's one of the things, I guess, the TSN comes into play. With all of that, I guess is Fanny, let me throw to you here, is that your involvement and how is TSN kind of structured here? Has it been a good something that has been good as far as your time has been involved with it, or has it been something like, oh my gosh, I got another TSN meeting here? Is it a burden?
Let me tell you a little bit about my I am relatively new to the executive committee for the TSN, and I'm enjoying it very much. One of the things that TSN has done, and has done a great job, was when we, as Vinny mentioned, the original ACE. And what we want to do with this new executive committee is making sure that the lessons learned from the first experience give us a better path moving forward. And the TSN is organized in usually as a support for customs. When a project comes out of COAC, they try to create a new working group, and they come to the TSN to get the appropriate people that belong to the TSN, that can represent trade in a proper manner and way, so that can help CBP build what they need to build. Our interest is to making sure that what CBP is building makes sense for us as well. We want to make sure that CBP understands that we are one of the users of their system, not just CBP. We have trace users, and we need to ensure that our needs are also taken into consideration when working in new projects. So there are different working groups currently. We have different type, as you know, multiple things are coming up more and more. And we definitely cooperate with CBP. We have ACE 2.0 working group. We have now the Minimus working group, we have e-bond working group, and so forth. So as the need comes, CBP counts on TSN to build the appropriate team to get them on board and help them through that process.
Excellent, excellent. And with this, there seems to be, if you go and try and count the number of customs brokers involved, it's almost like trying to count granules on the beach in the sand. It's like, my gosh, there's so many different brokers involved in things. But Megan, from your perspective, I guess this is an aspect of there's a lot of good, strong policy folks involved, heavily influencers and all that. It's, folks like, Amy Magnus and well, just a whole host of folks. I wouldn't be able to, Fred, you're one of those as a huge influencer, I would say. In that, and not taken away from anybody else on this, but in that is that with the TSN, there seems to be the need, and probably phenomenal, that NCBFAA provides a whole host of folks from the brokerage industry that is helping out and hammering out the details. So there are a lot more folks involved from a TSN in numbers, butts in the seat, if you will. Is there in particular like a top, like the top initiatives that are going on? Or, as far as the structure, and I'm not sure who can address this right now. You just mentioned, Fanny, the executive committee. I imagine that's just overall and how things are going and making sure that the bureaucratic requirements are there. I understand from each of the different committees. But what is the structure of the committees? Who can tell me what we're talking about as far as the different things that are going on there with the committees?
Well, we have multiple committees, and as I said, we have been very flexible on the structure of those. And it again comes from COAC's requirements, and they build the need. So as I said, we have currently multiple active working groups that CBP is counting on the TSN to help with. We have the de minimis working group. We have the Ocean AMS Streamlining working groups that are active, ACE 2.0, e-bond, in-bond working groups. So there is, it's not a static committee like it used to be in the past. In the past, we had entry summary committee. We have very flat and practical structure. But when CBP kind of let go of the TSN and to make it a trade association, we kind of are working, and we're very flexible, and we're working as needed. ACE 2.0 is the new another need that is coming, and we built that working group in cooperation with Customs. So it's not a static establishment per se. We move on as the need comes, and we will continue to do that. Now, the minimus is a very high impact that is in the news, is everywhere. So that is a very active working group, for example, with COAC. And also we have a special committee in the TSN that are working on the needs and the recommendation as what to do, how to improve certain processes. I hope that helps. It's not in the static committees per se anymore.
To add to that is usually when CBP comes to the TSN, they'll usually come to us and say, we have project XYZ and we need a cross between carriers, brokers, and software providers. So we'll send a note out in conjunction with CBP to the TSN and say, okay, who wants to volunteer on this? And here's the criteria. You need to have some knowledge on this. And then in conjunction with CBP, we'll pick the members of that working group and then start it from there and look for leaders within the teams and stuff to take it forward.
Well, it might be helpful to say that the Trade Support Network was originally created when CBP was developing ACE, right? They were transitioning from an old existing system to a new system. So the structure of the TSN was around that process. So as Fanny mentioned, basically the committees were organized around the pieces of the ACE system as CBP was developing them. And participation meant that there was always something, you were always working on your own requirements for that piece of the ACE system. Now we've evolved into more like Fred and Fanny described, this project orientation, because CBP's moved in that direction with ACE, right? It's a stood up system. It's now accepting all of the data. And piece by piece, they're going back and implementing special functionality. So now it spans more across those ACE modules than it used to in the past. So from a TSN perspective, at any given time, if you jump in and start getting involved, you might not see something happening that is pertinent to your functional area right then. But I would just encourage people to still get involved because, like Fred said, you never know what the next project's going to be and what kind of knowledge base CBP is going to need for that next knowledge or that next piece of functionality. So we're always looking for new folks to join to give new perspectives on the different projects CBP's implementing.
Well, and I will say I like the fact that instead of it becoming a static situation, meaning it's very stable, it's ongoing, it's never ending kind of a thing. It sounds like it's become more dynamic where, and you've got a project, you've got a somewhat of a set time frame to say, okay, we're going to put a committee together or a subcommittee, and it's going to focus on this topic for a certain period of time to try and get in there, do something, get the results, provide the feedback, shut it down, go on to the next thing. And that right there is where getting a lot of folks to do a little bit of work in a focused period of time is a very good thing. So with that, I guess the other question comes into play with these different committees from a customs perspective or CBP perspective. Is that something where are there CBP personnel as well as agency personnel that are on all these different committees?
Yes, definitely. They have a leader from the CBP side, and they have a leader from the trade side. That is a TSN member. Another point that I wanted to make, Andy, yes, we cooperate with customs very much, but we also, as a trade, we want to show and push also our needs. We have a list of enhancements requests that have come even from the old ACE that we want to continue to push the CBP. Unfortunately, because of budget issues, we haven't been successful in getting them in the schedule, but they are in the backlog for CBP system in the ACE system. So we continue to be, the, how could I call ourselves, the policeman from trade to try to ensure that the rules and our needs are also met with CBP. So from that perspective, I want to make sure that everybody understands that it's not just what CBP needs from us, but it's also what we as trade want from CBP, and we're here to do that as well.
Well, and Vinny, I'll just have to say, they have their list there. Why can't you just do it, Vinny?
Yeah.
Of course, Andy. Just wave a magic wand and bring budget and policy and make them all agree with everything the TSN wants, and we're done.
Yeah.
Of course,
the TSA does all of our requests, Vinny.
I don't know what the problem is with CBP, but I mean, TSA, hey, they're jumping in. I love it. No, it's a good group. Good group. Poor Megan, boy, she jumping in and jumping out. So, all right. So with what we've got, let me ask this question. What would y'all say would be maybe the top 3 things that TSN is working on, or that you would love to see some input from even our listeners that could, feed the information through, not only wanting to join, obviously that's a good thing as far as getting involved, but even providing input to the current standing members and whatnot. What would be the top 3 things that TSN seems to be hammering out right now? Who wants to take that on?
I could start with my 3. House bill release is one of them.
That was what that came to my mind too, Fanny.
Yes, actually, I'm also out in that working group and leading that working group, and it's been a very challenging project, but we continue to hope, right, that gets developed. The minimums working group is a big, is very current, is new, it's affecting customs, it's affecting trade, it's affecting our community. And that's an important to me. Maybe I'm going to let the others also explain, but those are the big ones that I'm very interested in working with CBP and ensuring that we accomplish what we need to accomplish to make trade.
Yeah, some of the low-hanging fruit that we have, Andy, out there is automated payment methods. Automated payment methods, some ACH, the ability to have customs give us our returns, our payments to us in an electronic format, to get rid of the paper, get rid of the checks, to get rid of the temptation there of bad things happening when people intercept a check and cash it, and things happen like that. So if it becomes electronic, it eliminates that. It makes it easier for us. So those are some of the things on the low-hanging fruit side that we got going from some of the little projects that Fanny had mentioned before, that we got our list of requests for development, if you will, that we want. Those are our highest ones right now to try to get those going.
All right, Melissa, what about from your perspective?
Well, I just wanted to put a plug in for our friends that are working on Export Manifest. This is one of those projects. I can't say it's highly active, but it's certainly been a long-term project, and we're still working on it. It's still in process. The TSN group is working very closely with the COAC working group that's on the same topic. And this is one thing to mention, is that often these working groups have overlap, which is really beneficial in that you can take those COAC recommendations and operationalize them a lot faster when we've got that kind of overlap and interworking of the groups. So that's another project that the TSN is still continuing.
From your perspective in the brokerage association and all that, what are some of the top things from from your perspective, I guess, that TSN should be and is working on?
Yeah. So, I think overarchingly, the biggest thing that I'm thrilled to see is CBP bringing TSN earlier in the process, because the reality is we don't have any extra money, right? Let's look at House Bill release. That was a project that could have taken that $10 million and really hit it out of the park. And the private sector really wasn't there when they needed to be. And as a result, some of that work is going to have to be redone. And that's precious money. That's money that, we really needed to have go to other things. And so I really want to commend CBP, because, the TSN is now a private group. We can, we have the flexibility to sort of bend and flex. And that's not CBP. We don't have any reports due to anybody. We don't have any, Congress is not breathing down the TSN's neck. And the reality is that this process can be a little awkward, right? A little bit uncomfortable. Neither side really kind of knows what we're doing, but we're there. We're at the table. And what we're going to do is deliver a better product the first time around, right out of the gate. And I'm thrilled to see it.
Excellent. Vinny, let me come to you on this from your perspective with CBP and especially your area where it's so innovative and new stuff. But as far as with TSN, what is it that you're hoping to see come out of TSN from a CBP perspective?
The biggest win for me across the board would be that TSN members would start looking at the global interoperability pieces that we're putting in place and start getting involved at the W3C level. I mean, that would just be the penultimate for us in the direction that we're going. And I know that's a big ask, but I would like to have some friendly companies involved with us, because we're up against some big guns in what we're trying to do at the W3C with the credentials. And that would just be fantastic. In fact, I will just say it's not definitive yet, but we might even want to form an international working group at some point at that level. And I think the TSN members would be very appropriate for that type of situation.
Wow. That's phenomenal. With that, I guess, let me ask this question. To your point, are there a lot of things that get hammered out through not only COAC and policy wise, but then with TSN that you're able to take to the WCO to say, this is what you're trying to push for reciprocal type agreements and processes and data flows and all of that with other customs organizations that you're able to, do? Has that empowered CBP at that level?
Andy, that's like a multifaceted question that we'd have to break down a little bit. Right now, I just have one of our CBP folks working on data standards. Now, actual data elements versus what I was talking about with the W3C are two different things. So I want to separate that out. W3C standards are communication standards, or a layer of standards for communication. At the WCO level, we will be adhering to whatever the standards are on the data so that they're easily translatable. But when you start getting into global, it's different requirements that are occurring. I will say that, in my view, if we really are serious about forming an international single window at some point, you can't do it unless you're in line with what I'm building right now, because all you're going to get is a patchwork of single windows, right? And that's not going to give anybody the pure effect of what we're always trying to achieve, which is one spigot in, one spigot out. So the first thing we have to do is get a standardization that the global community would get involved in. And that's something that I'm working on now. I think I mentioned before with the border 5 countries. We have some South American countries reaching out to Singapore, the EU. So we're trying to get a bunch of tests going on to get countries more and more involved in this.
Well, can you give an update on some of the things that you've been working on since the last time we talked with you?
I would love to, Andy. That's why I'm here today.
Let me tee this softball up for you, brother.
Lay it out on a platter for me. All right. Well, obviously, just really quickly, we completed our 2023 test in August. It was very successful. So what the customs folks did on the technical side was we wanted to take the data in from the credentials and actually map it into our system now using the legacy data and mixing the new with the old. That went really well. I mean, really well. It helped us to figure out a lot of things that we wouldn't have normally have known if we had jumped right into the credentials. So it was a good baby step. 2024, we will be able to, as a system, verify credentials. So if the credentials come in, we'll be able to authenticate them and make sure that they're coming from legitimate sources. We have some big names. We're working with standard groups like GS1 and Glyph. We have some big players that are coming in. I know Walmart is extremely interested in what we're doing. We've been talking to Nike. UPS just committed recently. So we have a lot of big players coming in on these projects, and it's amazing. We're going to be testing some stuff in 2024 on, believe it or not, green trade. I'm going to be able to test a environmental passport to take a look at something that we've been doing and put green trade on the map. I am trying desperately right now to work with our folks to bring in British Columbia, Canada, who is already on the same standards that we are and issuing credentials so that we can go in and verify their credentials on natural gas. So big stuff over there for 24. Please keep your eyes peeled. And anybody that wants to get involved, there's still some time. Get moving. We just brought in a couple of brokers. We have some other folks that have just come on board. We will stick you onto the team that you're interested in. And that's not a problem. You can just reach out directly to me and my team. In 2025, early 2025, and I'm going to be sharing some big news with you a little prior to what's coming up with the Trade Summit. So it's breaking, right? First of all, the international tests, we have 3 of those, 2 of which have been funded by Congress. By the way, my 2024 test was also funded by Congress. Don't hurt yourselves. We had bipartisan support. Don't fall off your chairs. This was amazing. All right. Bipartisan support on this. And this was headed by Senator Cassidy's office. So we appreciated the funding coming in for those tests. The 2025, early 2025 tests, I'm working with CTPAT very, very closely. They're looking to do government-to-government communications, which would benefit the trade, especially if there are things being done overseas for us receiving data. The thing that has happened is by joining forces with my team, the innovation team, we started to look at the government-to-government. Originally, it was just mutual recognition arrangement countries, but now we're looking at that as a global hub of communications for multiple governments. And I think we can take that very deep if that is successful. The two tests that we have affiliated one's affiliated with the work that we're doing with CTPAT, and that's the Global AEO CTPAT credential, which is one credential that can be used with multiple countries, and it doesn't matter how many agencies are involved. So if FDA, for instance, or EPA gets involved with some kind of facilitation benefit, they can also issue those credentials. So that's coming. And then the My Export is Your Import to verify that something is actually exported in one country and imported to another one. And we may do a little bit of play with if an examination occurs and somebody sees that it's supposed to be widget A, but they've got widget C, they'll be able to communicate with us as well. So I think that's really interesting stuff. This is all done through automation. All right. So with all that said, here's the big news that's coming and stuff that I'll be talking about in more detail at the summit. We just got funded for limited production for pipeline oil and steel, which was our 2023 test. Hoorah. Big news. Not only that, we have the contract vehicle. We've started pushing the money over. The red packages are starting to move in. So one of the things that I really want to get the TSN involved in early on is that particular piece with oil and steel, because I think a lot, especially the software providers, need to start looking at how we're doing things. There is a question now on how to deliver the standards to everybody in a form that is conducive to both the business and the technical side, because the way that we have it right now, we use a data dictionary and it's tied into the code, the JSON code. So it's difficult for a lot of the business users to look at. So I have a CBP person right now who all he does is data. God bless him, and he's going to be helping us to see if we can come up with a good format. And then as well, I'd like to discuss that with my TSM counterparts to see if we can communicate this properly. It's a different world. And the last thing I'd say is. And, I don't know how much we want to discuss all of this, but mostly what I am endeavored into is pre-arrival data. Okay, what happens prior to the entry, to a bill, to an inbound movement, and that has opened the door for a lot of great work. All the trade, all the operators, we've been getting such positive responses from it because it really builds a transparent supply chain. And I think that that's going to have a really strong impetus for how we modernize in the future. And it already has. We've been very influential in 21st Century Framework on the innovation side. Obviously, ACE 2.0, which I've been facilitating on the other side with the COAC. And we're trying to get our business cases finalized so that we can start sharing with the TSN. And once that takes place, it's going to be round 2 ACE, right? We're going to be going in there, rolling up our sleeves and trying to figure out, what is this modernization effort really start looking like, which is going to bring us into the operational requirements as well. So it's exciting time. I having experienced the first ACE, we got such a nice compliment across the board from now retired AC Borkowski. And he said, this is the first, he said, CBP is doing this right. We started from the business perspective, not from the technical perspective. So we looked at business cases and what we want to do. And innovation is helping to set those parameters in a very, very good way. And the last thing, let me leave it at this, is that when you start thinking about data as a foundation, right? Some of the data we're getting right now, not that great, all right? The data in the new system is great. I mean, it really details commodities. It details locations, who's involved. It will start really, I think, crafting the way in which we facilitate, and also the way in which we hold people responsible for their data. So I think there's a lot of promise in what we're doing, especially since this is a future-proof system. You can invest however you want going into that future. So I said my piece there, Andy.
Things there. And to our listeners, listen, there's a lot of what Vinny had just talked about. If you are somewhat of a novice in the industry, just hang in there, because there's a lot of things that Vinny just mentions is phenomenal. It's actually is fantastic. With that, I want to come to Fred here. Fred, I don't think we've mentioned this. I mean, you're with FedEx and you're dealing with phenomenal systems and all of that. And I have a lot of respect for you. Let me ask you, is that from your perspective in what we're doing and what Vinny just talked about, I would think that there's a lot of excitement with some of the progress that could be made and some of the projects that he's talked about. What about from your perspective on the?
Oh, for sure. And Vinny, you know us, we're always willing to talk data with you, because that's kind of what we do for a living. No, but we've had some conversations with Vinny's team on the new things that are coming. There's some how to transmit data back and forth, how to get rid of some of our 80-byte card things, and what can we do in advance of the new things coming, the ACE 2.0s, the things that Vinny's got in his pipeline, and what are the things that we could do today from an innovation standpoint to try to set ourselves up for what's going to come. Can we have a different data transmission? I mean, Vinny just spoke to how do we get data back and forth? How do we transmit data back and forth? Well, today we're doing it through ABI. It works great for what it was designed to do, but it's time for something new, and we're all willing to work with that. And if we can make the data better, if we can make it easier, we're all for that. From a technical standpoint, any innovation is good. And what we build today is obsolete tomorrow. So there's always room for making things better, and it just never stops.
And Fred, obviously, if I can reduce that data duplication down onto a single window, that would be something that a lot of people would be very happy about, right?
Vinny, everybody wants a single window because, like we mentioned before, we have a single window today, but it has 38 panes in it.
I only built one.
Those panes are in various parts of your body, but
yeah.
So
I know that.
Like to have one window.
I agree with you. I'm a purist in that manner.
I think one of the things to really think about as we look to a future where there is more data integration, one, we would, as the TSN, would love to be in that conversation talking about how to make sure that we protect our own country's proprietary data and, protect the innovation that's going on. Not all of our trading partners are our friends. And the other thing that, is very interesting about this concept is that once you get to a point, right now, Customs is wanting to collect data, closer and closer to the source, right? Which has got some benefits and some drawbacks. From our perspective, Customs collecting data from the fishing boat captain and the rice grower and, the whoever, well, you don't have any oversight over those people. So what ends up happening is data is collected that may or may not comply with the data that comes in through, I'm going to call them more sort of regulated sources. And now we're in a bit of a pickle. So I hope that as international data integration continues on, the data that Customs seeks from sources that they don't directly regulate will be able to be better, reliable, more reliable data because it's going to be regulated by the countries in which we're partnering with. Do you see what I'm saying? Am I making sense?
Well, and I will. Yeah. Well, let me just say this is that one of the things that with all the data collection and all that, for the good corporate citizens that are out there that are exporting and importing and they're providing this information, what's going to happen is as the data is being collected, it should streamline the clearance process for those good corporate citizens, for those shipments coming through the ports so that they are moving through. And as I like to say, I'd like to see this stuff move through like greased lightning. with that, I would also say that it should then allow for those shipments that have folks that are acting somewhat nefarious, that are, they're not providing all that detail, so that the expertise of CBP and the other agencies are able to be applied to those shipments that need their expertise to check things out. And those that are the good corporate citizens that have crossed the T's, dotted the I's, jumped through hoops and everything else can move on through and get that stuff on, so that our economy and commerce is moving forward, and they're focused on those that are not the nice players. So as we're going through this, there's a whole lot of things that we can, we just keep hammering away with. I think this is fantastic, but also to your point, Megan, the data is coming from different aspects that customs and other agencies are going to be able to get their hands on. It will then empower them, hopefully, to say, if I'm saying that I'm moving it from point A with this carrier and this is the widget A, it's not all of a sudden it arrives at the destination and it's a widget C and it came through other means. It's like somebody's not circumventing processes. So I think it's going to be a positive there, and empowering our agencies with the right information. And if there's something in conflict, at least it's a red flag that can be checked out.
It's a really great opportunity for CBP to continue to look at providing benefits for our trusted trading partners, right? The CTPAT participants, the ISA participants, these are companies that have opened their books literally and figuratively to CBP. And, this is a great opportunity to shrink that haystack and say, okay, we're in partnership. Let's look at sort of getting you into the fast lane. And it's really exciting. It's an exciting opportunity.
With that, let me just, we need to, for sake of time here, we could keep talking about this, but I'm going to go around the horn here and ask you to, for your closing comments, if somebody is interested in TSN or some of the things out there, what is it that you would suggest as far as people to take action? If you're a high level person in a company and you've got people under you that should be involved in this, what should you look at? Melissa, let's start with you. What do you think as far as from your perspective?
So we continue, I mentioned earlier, we continue to get applications from the trade. So if you hear something in here that you find interesting and you want to make sure your company is participating, you can reach out. There are forms on the CBP website, and there's also a TSN website that you can complete an application. Let us know that you want to get involved, and we can make sure we get you connected with the right folks.
Yeah, Melissa kind of summed it up. If you hear something on here that you want to be involved with, we're open to taking on anybody with the knowledge and the things that could help us in any way. So technically, we have a lot of smart technical folks, but there's a lot of new technologies out there. So we welcome them, and we welcome the business side, and any bit of knowledge that we could get that we don't have, we'll be happy to bring on. You know how that is, Andy. We'll take anything.
I bet. Megan, how about from your perspective?
But she got the free to join part out. So that was
it is free to join. The only thing is, Andy, the applications have to go through Fanny, Melissa, and I, and the other two members of the EC.
Yes. Okay. So it's
so it is reviewed, but I don't think in all the time that I've been on the EC that we've ever turned anyone away.
No.
Agreed.
Fanny, how about from your perspective and from your overall?
I wanted to invite not just the classic trade partners, but there are new trade partners that are coming up every day. Mm-hmm. And I want to invite all of them to participate. Mm-hmm. And your communication with CBP or any logistics for that matter, right? We want to build a supply chain that makes sense. So if you are interested and you would like to be part of that, please come and join us. It's not for what maybe you didn't hear anything here that you would like to address as a trade member that you want us to help you with. Please come on.
All right, Megan, let me come back to you and allow you to what from your perspective.
So one of the things that excites me most about the TSN is that it's actually the only trade group that I know of that's totally free to join. I would suggest starting with looking at our website, and I'd like to especially thank Chris Flourish as our volunteer webmaster. He does a great job. So, check it out. We'll make sure that the website is linked in the show description notes. And then from there, if there's something that sparks your interest, or if there's something you think we're missing, right? If there's a huge problem in your company that you don't see on our agenda, this is a group kind of for us, by us, with us, right? We're it, right? We're the operator down to, down to the person who cleans the OR. Like it's a group effort, and it's a great group. And I think it's a group that's really great at getting traction with the Hill as a good, place to come and find technical trade experts, and as some place, like I said, that there's no financial barrier to entry.
All right. Vinny, let's finish up with you. Is that from your perspective again on what you're looking at, as well as I'm going to throw one more question for you, and that is, how can our listeners help you from a CBP perspective? Is there any support that you're needing regarding, as far as budgetary type things we're trying to push for, or projects or support?
Well, I would start off by saying, please support, what's going on with ACE 2.0. I think everybody needs to get involved in that. Even though I'm more of a minor player, I see that as, a major impact for the future. You should all be involved. I think the TSN is a perfect area because they can be all expansive. There are software things that are going on now that are non-traditional. I think non-traditional parties need to get involved. They need to draw them in. I did want to also let Megan know not to worry. The role of the broker has become very clear in our 2023 test. Please ask me at the summit. Okay. And the last thing I will end with is nobody should be afraid of the revolutionary changes that are coming. Nobody's job is going away. There may be changes that are coming, but it's not to do anybody in. It's just to make a tool that is going to make the supply chain stronger. And for those businesses that are doing the right thing, they will be moving their freight much more easily, not only with CBP, but with all of the PGAs. That's the goal, right? Facilitation and security. So I'm impressed. And I think most of the folks that are working on these projects are impressed. Get involved so you know what we're talking about. Thanks.
Well, folks, I want to say that this has been a phenomenal. Listen, I thank this whole panel. Y'all are a fine group of people to be associated with. I really appreciate y'all coming on our show. And to our listeners, folks, this is something this is just Trade Support Network. TSN is just another aspect where you can get involved. And especially if you are moving up the chain in your career, this is a good area to get involved to affect positive change in the importing and exporting community. So I would highly recommend that you, as Megan said, hit the website, look at it. Every one of these fine folks, their contact information is going to be on there. If you have questions, you can reach out to Lalo or myself. We'll get you to the right folks. If you want to get involved, my goodness, we'll work you to death. So, but that said, thank you so much. This is a fantastic group of people. With that, I hope everybody has a great day.
Thanks, Neil. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for joining us. SimplyTrade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest in the show or would like to sponsor SimplyTrade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at SimplyTradePod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. SimplyTrade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by SimplyTrade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.